Hey everybody, it's me, Sam Stein, managing editor at the Bulwark with my man, Will Sommer, author of False Flag, one of the most critically acclaimed, widely loved, and praised newsletters in the game. Truly a masterpiece.
That's me.
One review that I read the other day said, essential reading. Essential. I know.
It must be talking about another newsletter, but
Yeah,
I'm happy to take it.
Sorry, that was actually the breakdown newsletter. Sorry, I got my wires crossed here. Will, you have another good one today? You made the case. I wasn't convinced, but I think you made it after I read it. I was convinced that this Tucker Carlson interview with Nick Fuentes is a big deal. I guess I wasn't convinced because I'm sort of the mindset like, oh my God, so much crap is happening. Of course, they're talking to each other. Whatever. This is just like furthering a trend that we've already experienced. But your position is that actually it's kind of a seminal moment. Can you elaborate as to why?
Yeah, so just to lay the groundwork here, we had on Monday, Tucker Carlson put out this kind of long anticipated interview he was going to do with the white nationalist podcaster Nick Fuentes, who's very much a rising and kind of challenging the status quo force in MAGA media. Tucker, I will say, basically let Nick Fuentes say whatever. I mean, at one point he talked about organized Jewry, and Tucker's going, why were people mad at you? And then Nick Fuentes would give kind of like the biggest spin to his comments, and then he'd say, well, I don't know, I can't believe they're canceling you for that, Nick. So he gave him this really massive platform. I wanted to write about this because it really kind of it's gone off like a bomb in right-wing media, and everyone's freaking out about it because Nick Fuentes, because this is a guy who's a Holocaust denier, very openly anti-Black. I mean, he'll say the N-word. He's obviously extremely anti-Jewish and, has admired Hitler, people like that. And so this is someone that even in kind of the topsy-turvy world of right-wing media these days was seen as someone you didn't really pal around with or promote or collaborate with. And Tucker now has opened that door up. And really, who's to say? That sort of suggests that his politics now are acceptable within the Republican tent.
Yeah, I guess that's the question is like, maybe I just assume they're already acceptable, right? Like I just sort of the mindset that, yeah, of course he's not toxic and anti-Semitic and horrible, but at the same time, he's got a huge platform and people love him on the right. Obviously, I'm not a big fan. So yeah, I mean, I guess that was where I was sort of torn. Is like on the one hand, obviously he's a horrible figure, gross. My people are not the biggest fans, to say it lightly. On the other, I almost felt like he already had achieved acceptability, and I don't know why I felt that way because I suppose when he had dinner with Donald Trump in the campaign, obviously Donald Trump rushed to disassociate himself with it. But then again, he had dinner with Donald Trump, right? Like he actually did get into Mar-a-Lago. So I already thought he was kind of in the realm of acceptability in that sense. I'm curious, who do you think's going to if you had to guess, who platforms the guy next? Because you say Tucker putting him on the show opens the doors, but to what? Like he's not going to go on Fox, is he?
I mean, maybe someday he could. Yeah. I mean, there's someone with similar politics. Will he start going on Megyn Kelly? He's not going to go on Ben Shapiro. I mean, Ben Shapiro is no fan of his. But right. I think, it's maybe not even.
But maybe he will. Maybe Ben Shapiro might do it and just be like, I'm going to argue with you. And they'll just argue. Right. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was a pretty good taboo on, praising Hitler, questioning the Holocaust that even persisted on the right. And as you said, I mean, it is a little silly on one hand to be saying, Tucker, now you've done it. Now the Republicans are all going to be Nazis when Trump did dine with him. Although, on the other hand, that was treated as a huge disaster. And, all these Republicans were saying, how could this possibly happen? Trump had to disown him or kind of distance himself from it. So I do think, I mean, this is sort of the latest triumph for Nick Fuentes, unfortunately, particularly after Charlie Kirk's assassination. He's been on a real string. There's this big TikTok trend of young women who will be listening to Nick Fuentes and saying, this guy might make some good points or something. Or you have these kind of more mainstream podcast hosts playing it and saying, they say this guy's crazy, but, maybe he's not so crazy on this issue. So yeah. I think it's just kind of his growth. I mean, on the other hand, you're saying.
Let me do the other hand for that because you reference this, but like we're like, oh my God, it's like super disturbing, and it is that this guy who is a Hitler apologist and a neo-Nazi and openly hates Jews, and super disturbing that he's ascending to these heights and getting these followers, and he's really opening the door. And yet, in like the past month, we had a story where these young Republicans were like sending texts to each other, being like, "I got, you know, what was the shit?" It wasn't them who said I have a Nazi streak. That was the Trump appointee who said, Paul Ingratius, who said I had a Nazi streak. But these guys were, talking about, Hitler and stuff on text. It's clear that there's a thread of this that's in the movement that exists, and Fuentes is the embodiment of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very real that that kind of Gen Z or younger millennial group of, maybe millennials in general. I won't exempt my own generation from this. I think the kind of younger crop of Republican operatives clearly has a ton of Groyperism going on, or, being this
Right.
kind of, even if they aren't saying specifically, I am following Nick Fuentes. I mean, there's a lot of quasi joking around about Hitler and Jews and
Right.
race. And, we can look at the Doge staffer who got caught with making these similar comments, and ultimately they hired him back. There were all of these instances that keep coming up. I mean, there was someone tweeted at me about some Republican, staffer at the state level. And this is getting so common now that I was just like, I can't cover it if it's the state level. I'll be, we'll be playing whack-a-mole.
I was going to say, you could spend much of your day probably unearthing really rancid social media posts of mid to low level Republicans that are basically like, Hitler, he had some good ideas, or like, I got like a little Hitler in me. And then, that's just the way it's going to be. And I just don't want this to be confused. I'm not diminishing Nick Fuentes. I do think there's something significant about Tucker saying, or at least not challenging the guy. The other thing that happened though is that today, and this was a little bit more surprising, I suppose. The guy who heads up Heritage, the conservative think tank, Kevin Roberts, puts out a video in which he responds to, I guess there was a bunch of calls that Heritage distanced itself from Tucker Carlson over the Nick Fuentes interview. So I didn't realize there was calls for Heritage to distance itself from Tucker, but whatever. This guy, Kevin Roberts, who you might remember from the Project 2025 bugaboo over the campaign, he puts out this video. It's 2 hours and 2 hours. It's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I don't know if we're going to play it all, but let's play some of it.
We will always defend America, and we will always defend our friends against the slander of bad actors who serve someone else's agenda. That includes Tucker Carlson, who remains, and as I have said before, always will be a close friend of the Heritage Foundation. The venomous coalition attacking him are sowing division. Their attempt to cancel him will fail.
All right, so I have some thoughts on this, but what were your initial thoughts about this?
Sure. So I mean, this is Heritage. This is one of sort of the pillars of movement and conservatism. They were sponsoring Tucker's show. They had this donation page where you would go to, if he'd give the plug on the show, and then you go and donate. They'd say, "We're so proud to be partners with Tucker." And then earlier this week, after the Fuentes interview came out, they edited that and removed. So if you went to heritage.org/Tucker, it now just said donate to the Heritage Foundation, not we're proud to be in business with Tucker Carlson, things like that. And so that had prompted me to email them and say, hey, and I think a lot of other people saw this and they thought, Tucker, Heritage is abandoning Tucker. And it seemed, even in this age of, we're not going to cancel anybody, whatever, it seemed like something that probably would have happened. And instead, not only do they not cancel Tucker, they stick with him and put out this video saying, Christians can criticize Israel. Dude. A lot of things, basically, we're not going to go after people on our own side when we should be focusing on the left.
It was crazy. I mean, I can't even, it's hard to imagine the Heritage Foundation doing this type of messaging 5 years ago. It really is. The globalists or the mouthpieces of Washington, they're not going to be bullied by them. And it's like, you might as well put triple parentheses around that. They talk about not taking directions from the donor class, focusing on our adversaries on the left, not attacking our friends on the right. That's like classic Republicanism these days. Tucker always will be a close friend of Heritage. Always? Like, is there nothing Tucker can do that would make you disavow the guy? I mean, there's got to be something. It really stood out to me in a way that, I don't know, it's just very much the rhetoric of the moment of the right from Kevin Roberts there.
One thing I would point out here is that, there's also the Charlie Kirk of it all, right? Because Nick Fuentes was Charlie Kirk's archenemy. In the case of Heritage, They, in their Capitol Hill office, had a giant 10-story banner. Don't forget Charlie Kirk, the lessons of Charlie Kirk. We miss him so much. Now they're paying, because they're sponsoring this show, they're paying to platform a guy who not only was Charlie Kirk's arch enemy years ago, but up until basically the day he died, and since then has been saying, well, I think Erica Kirk is a plant. This is some weird setup. Or saying, he was saying that just the vilest things about Charlie Kirk. And
Right.
so, and now I guess they're fine with that.
Well, I think your theory of the case that you put in the piece is probably the one that I ascribe to too, which is that they're just big old, and I'm going to say it, pussies, because they don't want to get the backlash that will come if you offend people like Carlson or if you offend people like Nick Fuentes. They just don't, and so they do whatever. It's not about focusing your, going after your adversaries on the left. It's about avoiding the criticisms from the right. That's what it's about. They just don't want to have to deal with the online mob.
This is a phenomenon we're seeing a lot now, which is, people are avoiding taking stands against things they previously would have opposed. Megyn Kelly has been very reluctant to go after Fuentes or Tucker, or Candace Owens. Similarly, I think Tucker, he tangled about a month ago with Nick Fuentes over who was a federal operative or whose dad was in the CIA in Tucker's case. And then, according to Fuentes, and this didn't make it in the piece, but basically right after the CIA fight, Tucker calls Fuentes up and he says, hey, you want to come on my show? So it's clearly like Tucker gets owned here. And then he's like, oh, God, I got to get right with this guy. Get him on my show.
Well, I do think that's like a real side effect of online culture, which is that you are instantaneously going to be inundated with an online mob if they don't like you. And honestly, if you say even anodyne things, they'll come after you. And it has a psychological effect on people in this business. It's kind of like audience capture, where you just don't want to have to deal with that shit, or you're afraid that you're going to lose audience. And all I can say is that as someone who takes it on the chin all the time online, it's good for you. You should embrace getting dunked on. It's fantastic. It's refreshing for the soul.
Well, Sam, if getting dunked on is good for you, you must just be doing absolutely fabulous.
Look at this.
Day in, day out.
You think that this is natural? No, this comes with people online screaming at me. That it's like the greatest rejuvenation. Every day I look forward to it. It's fantastic.
Well, the one thing I would say here, keep in mind, Nick Fuentes is a young guy in his 20s who basically came out of nowhere, marched in Charlottesville, all this stuff. And I think it really tells you where the dynamics are in right-wing media, that you have someone as big as Tucker and also an institution like Heritage, the sort of behemoth of the MAGA movement saying, ooh, yikes, excuse us.
Now, Kevin Roberts did say, I don't like Nick Fuentes in this video. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like they are so nervous about these little groypers who have huge followings that they bend over backwards to not look like they're not on the same page. All right, buddy, listen. Thank you for this. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having to swim in these waters. I always say that, but it's true. You do a good service for us, so thank you for that. Everyone subscribe to False Flag, which is a must-read newsletter. Even if I was joking, it really is a must-read. Subscribe to this YouTube page where we have fun conversations like this, and we'll catch you soon.